Mr. Chair. I just wanted to come back to the issue of the purpose of the bill and relate Part 2 to the purpose of the bill. And it says, and I quote, to enable the purpose of the bill to enable consent and regulatory approvals for the temporary Rugby World Cup related activities and facilities to be considered expeditiously, and I emphasise, as my colleague had this before, expeditiously, not experimentally, or expediently, or excitedly, or any of the other X words that we might spring to mind. And then it goes on to say that the bill establishes the Rugby World Cup Authority as a consenting body for the purpose of determining applications for temporary regulatory approvals. Now, on these regulatory approvals, I mean, David Clendon made the point, I think, before that this Rugby World Cup has been a long time in coming. We've actually organised it rather well. And somebody in my electorate, which has Eden Park in it, and which will see a lot of the major games of the Rugby World Cup, including the final, we know that probably better than most, because in and around that area, quite apart from the fact that we've had to refurbish the Eden Park, which has caused huge consternation to the local residents in the area, has been a subject of some battling and fighting for many, many years. That's one thing. The transport around the area has been completely remodelled. All done through a judicial process, through a consent-driven process, not necessarily to the satisfaction of everybody that is there, admittedly, but nevertheless has happened. The transport, the roading has been completely remodelled. The railway station at Kingsland completely changed, remodelled to handle the number of the crowds.
We're on part 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason I'm mentioning many of these changes that have happened is because they've happened through a judicial process which has been agreed upon, and that's exactly what Part 2 in this bill is looking at. Is looking at a good temporary process through which people can be confident that they are being well heard by people who don't have a vested interest, with this complete accountability in the decisions being made. And Phil Twyford just went through some of these points in the powers of authority of the authority that is going to be set up to do this. Clause 10 says that for the purpose of carrying out its functions, the authority has full capacity to carry on or undertake any activity, do any act, or enter into any transaction, and for the purposes of paragraph A, full rights, powers and privileges. Now, Mr. Chair, that seems to me to be a pretty broad brief given to that authority to make the sort of changes and to make the alterations that, for example, we're going to perhaps need to see around the Eden Park area in my electorate, to look at the drinking and liquor licensing situation in nearby Kingsland, for example. That gives, and then we go on from that part 1 there to say that goes on to say that the authority has the same functions, powers, privileges and immunities in respect of every application made under this Act as the relevant statutory person or body would have, but for this Act. There can't be anything very much clearer than this piece of legislation in giving wide-ranging powers to a body that we should have full confidence in. And it was pleasing to hear Mr. Mallard talk about the fact that Mr. McCulley has actually been sharing some of the names of the people who might be appearing on that authority as well. So this is a genuinely bipartisan approach.
Well, I wouldn't say Michelle Bogue's got not that he's mentioned her recently. Carry on.
Well, I don't want to comment on any individuals because I, Mr. Chair.
I call Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much.